Hello everyone, my name is Aklima Bibi and this show is called Aklima Bibi with NL24. Now, every year, thousands of children are sexually abused by adults, including their own parents. In the year ending March 2019, the police in England and Wales recorded 73,260 sexual offences where the data to identify that the victim was a child, according to the Office of National Statistics. Today, we are going to talk about these issues of child sexual abuse. To discuss these issues, I have a very special guest who has also decided to speak out about her own ordeal in the hands of her own father, who sexually abused her from the age of just 4 years old. She is hoping to create a greater awareness and for societies to take these issues more seriously. This courageous lady is MAYAMEEN Meftahi. MAYAMEEN, thank you very much for joining us. How are you feeling anyway, first of all?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to discuss this topic. I know it's very uncomfortable, but sometimes uncomfortable makes change. So thank you for that.
I'm sure it's not easy for you to sort of speak out about your own ordeals. And obviously we're going to discuss other issues as well. But I'm going to ask you, I know it's not comfortable, but I am going to ask you, could you please share with us your ordeal or what happened to you when you were a child?
Yeah, of course. So actually, I think I'm going to work backwards with how I'll share that, purely because that's how it came about in the beginning. So what actually happened was my father had been arrested in 2011. So this was not so long ago, as you can imagine. We're now in 2020, so we're looking at just over 9 years ago. So I had grown up within the context of child sexual abuse from a very early age. It was, I guess, in my eyes, normal. It was something that was just part of my life. It was a deep entrenched grooming process. Got on with my life. I left home when I was 15. Carried on with my life, but I still have my father in my life, as I'm sure many who may watch this can relate to. That it's a very complex thing to go through. It's not so straightforward as a typical child will be abused and run away from home and report their abuser. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And so I continued on with my life and continued to go into studies, and I got a job. And then actually in 2005, I went away and I found my now husband. It was on holiday. Skipping forward to that, it was 2009 when I gave birth to my first child. So when I gave birth to my first child, who was a boy, it was a really stressful time, because it came about of, how do I protect my child? My father was still in my life at this point. How do I protect my child when I've got this secret?
When you say
and I know what
when you say your father was still in your life, do you mean you actually were living with him, or you moved away?
No, we lived out of home. Moved out of home when I was like 15, but he was still there. I still did the weekend trips, the daily contact. He was actually quite a large part of my life still. That was a part of controlling manner. That was not going to not happen, where he didn't control the majority of my life. And so he was still around. So yeah, still doing the whole family, setup in that sense.
He's still controlling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, Lima. What people don't realize when it comes to, if it's a family member, is that you've gone from, you go through an extreme grooming process. You are dependent on the same person that is harming you, because you don't know anything else. And then if you are lucky enough, I say lucky enough, to not the abuse gets stopped by that person, then you're still, you know, living with the shame and the denial and what's happened and what is it, and I can't tell anybody. And so you have all these emotions that come with it. And so he was still very much a part of my life. And then obviously coming into my husband's life with me. And it was, like I said, when I gave birth to my first child, that was really when it kind of hit me that, you know, what do you do next? But anyway, so that was around 2009, and it only happened 2 years later that I was on holiday with my husband and my child. We were visiting his in-laws in Tunisia, and that was when I got the phone call from the police to say that they had arrested him, and that I was now safe. And then literally my whole life just turned around at that point. It was just absolutely unbelievable, because it wasn't just a case of learning about or trying to accept that, you know, my father had been arrested for my child abuse. It was the stuff that was then to lead on to how he was arrested, what they found. You know, I'll never forget them saying to me on the phone that we don't need you. We don't need you to be a witness. We don't need to be involved. We have absolutely everything we need to send him to prison. And I was like, you know, I'm at the age of like 20 then. I'm thinking, what on earth are you going on about? You know, what do you have that can make you feel so secure that you can protect me now after I've lived my life and, you know, had a child? And obviously that's when that story unfolded, that, you know, he was continuing after the age that I thought I had run away from. He was continuing to date rape, and that they had plenty of evidence in video footage of everything that I'd been through from a very, very young age, and he had videoed everything. So, you know, all the evidence was there for
So
them to do what they
you
needed
had
to do.
video of his abuse against you.
Yeah, so he when he what he used to do, which is why he was sentenced and why he was you know, the evidence was there, is that there was a camera fitted into the light bulb in the house, and everything was filmed. There was footage. There was hundreds of hours of video footage of my sexual abuse and rape.
Okay. 4 years old. That's you're still a baby. Where was your mother? I mean, let me ask, could you remember from the age of 4 what he did to you? I know it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I want people to know, you know, you've been very brave. I want people to know what goes on in the hand of the, you know, adult, especially your own flesh and blood. What happened to you from the age of 4? What sort of abuse did you go through?
And that's exactly it. So from the age of 4, I do remember incidents, and obviously this has been able to piece back together through all the evidence that was found, and through all the footage, and through all the videos, and all the photos, everything. So from the age of 4, the way the grooming process started with myself, and as it does with many young children, is that there would be things like I would wake up downstairs with a cartoon playing while my father was just sitting down beside me, just stroking my body. So that's the grooming process to how it started. You know, and I remember waking up, cartoon being playing, and thinking, you know, why am I here? Like, why am I not in my, you know, comfy little bed? And they are the most vivid memories that I have, is that he would be crouched down beside me, touching my body, and then obviously touching himself in order to fulfill his desires that he was.
Sorry, I mean, even your private parts?
Yeah, of course, my bodily parts, my breasts, and, you know, all of my bodily parts were constantly, and this was not once a week or once a month. This was daily, you know, so it was a daily thing, so that it becomes so normal to wake up downstairs on the sofa with my father crouched down beside me. That was normal.
What did you do? How did you feel? I know you say it's normal. Did you feel scared? Did you feel it's wrong? Did you feel anything?
Not at that age, Aklima. You know, at that age, he was
Yeah.
daddy. He was my
Yeah.
precious father. What, you know, I looked up to him at a very young age, and he was, you know. And don't forget as well that for this instance with my situation, it was very much I was the princess. So he would always, you know, say how beautiful I'm his princess, I'm his daddy's girl. So from a very young age, you know, looking back, obviously in hindsight, I can see, you know, where that was. But you know, as a child, you just idolize that person, and you know, if they're touching you, then they love you. You know, and this is the complexity of abuse with young children, is that you have a fine line between love and hate. It's only when you get to an age of maybe understanding that you start to think this doesn't feel right. So for me, that was
Yeah.
actually around the age of 10 and 11 when I started to think this is not right. This is not normal.
Okay. When did he actually started kind of like actually raping you?
Well, the actual there was never, you know, exact dates of that, but the penetration, so the rape, the child sexual abuse was around 8 and 9.
And how long did that continue?
It continued up to the age that I, you know, realized that something was not normal. So this was about 11 to 12. But unfortunately, like I said, which I wasn't actually aware of, is that date rape was then, you know, was the next option. So when he was arrested, he was also sentenced for the drugs, because that was part of his sentencing guidelines. So the drugs that he was then using was actually from around the age of about 13.
Okay. What sort of drugs did he use? Is that he used it on you, or he actually got you to take these
Yeah,
drugs?
it's a date rape. So yeah, it's a date rape drug, and speed and ecstasy were the main ones that were being used. But the date rape that was actually he used to get in from America, is obviously an illegal drug. And what he would normally do, from what the evidence has been provided, is that would be placed into my cups of tea, into my milk, into any of my drink when I was going to bed. So obviously, I was pretty much unconscious
So you wouldn't
throughout the
even know.
evenings.
You wouldn't even know about
No.
it. Where was your mother?
No, and I think that's probably, well, I think actually, Klima, that's probably been the hardest reality that I've actually had to deal with, because when you are a child abuse survivor, and when you actually think that you've got away from it, you actually feel like, you know, so for me, I would say I got away from it officially at the age of 14, 15, when I left the family home. So to then find out from the police that actually that was not the case. The case was not that I had escaped that abuse. The case then became that I was being drug raped. And I think that's probably been the hardest reality that I've had to deal with over these years, is that where I felt like I had taken back power and control of my life, I actually hadn't. And unfortunately, you know, that went on for many, many years of my life,
So,
potentially right up until he was arrested.
okay. Sorry, MAYAMEEN, where was your mother? Is your mother
In
still
the
around?
house.
She was. So
Yeah, my
this
mum.
happened while your mother was in the house.
Yeah.
She.
So very often my mother would go to, back in them days, to bingo as her socializing. So she'd be spend most of her time there, and so that's when like the main majority of the abuse would happen, where he'd put me in the bath and he'd want to bath me, and you know, have that bodily touch, where he'd ask me to, you know, dress up in sexy outfits, and because I'm daddy's princess and he needs to take pictures of me. All of that mostly happened when she was out, but most of it, the majority of it, was overnight while she was in bed.
Wow. So while she was in the house, this happened to you.
Yeah,
Did you ever
yeah.
try to tell
And
her?
all the evidence was found in the same house that she'd only just left last year. So
Did you ever try to tell her?
I've told her. I ended contact with her in 2013. I tried to tell her on many occasions, but I tried to tell family members, but I was just the spoiled little princess that was always trying to get attention. So I was the little, I was one of the main only girl in the family as well. I've been surrounded by lots of nephews and boys, so I was always known as the spoilt little princess that was just an attention seeker. When my father was actually arrested, I phoned my mother whilst I was away in Tunisia, and I was just like, did you know? Did you know? And she was like, of course I didn't know. Unfortunately, what then transpired was her actions when I returned did not indicate that she did not know.
Okay. It happened in the house. So she, you tried to tell. So every family members, even your own mother, was in denial. So obviously life wouldn't have been easy for you.
Do I think the word denial justifies it? No, yeah. I think she turned her eye on it.
What do you exactly mean about that?
I do believe now that she knew it was happening, but she just ignored it, pushed it under the carpet. Many of my family members will say that, well, we knew that there was something wrong. We used to try to intervene, but we never really knew it was that. But then, I have a lot of doubt and a lot of suspicion around many of my family members who claim that they didn't know it was that. When, and this has been public in the press, that, my father had history of rape. He served a sentence in 1978 before I was even born, and I was born in 1983. So I think, for me personally, I do believe there was a sweeping under the carpet, hoping it would all just disappear one day, rather than being actually in denial that it wasn't happening. I think they knew it was happening, they just didn't know how to deal with it.
They just didn't know what to do, or they wanted sort of like you said, just it'll disappear and everything will be back to normal. Do you have any siblings? I know you said
I have.
What about the siblings?
Two half. Yeah, I have two half brothers, and I have one brother that's, via my mother and father together. So yeah, I have brothers.
Did you try to tell them, or what was their reaction?
I don't think I ever really tried to tell them. They were living, especially my brother, my closest brother. He was living in a house where my father was very violent towards him. And that's his story to tell. But then he left home at a very early age. He left home much, much earlier than I did. He literally left the family home quite, at a very young age. So I was the one left in the family home. So I think that the whole setup of my family from that side is that, there's a lot of violence around them in general. They're quite violent people. So, I don't think I ever actually tried to tell him, maybe not physically. Of course, I told many people in the ways that children would tell people, in terms of running away from home, being that naughty child, being that spoiled child, having issues at school, all the indirect ways that children speak out is how I spoke out. I would run away from home, the police would return me back to the house. There was always fighting going on inside our house. So, there's children never directly try and tell someone. They will do it indirectly through a behavior. And it's just, whether that adult will protect that child or whether they'll just sweep it under the carpet and make excuses.
When you realize that this was wrong or something was wrong and you tried to run away, what did you actually do to actually escape?
Yeah, I actually packed my bags and it was very young. I was very young, and I left with a local neighbor, and we got on the train, and I'll never forget, I had my bag and I just got on a train, and obviously I didn't have the the train ticket. So when the inspectors came round, we were found and we were returned back to the family home. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because I don't know where I was going, to be honest, but leaving, I was out. I couldn't stop what was happening to me, so the only way I could do it was by running away. I was then returned back to the family home.
Did the neighbor know about it? I mean, was it an adult? Did you tell the neighbor, or what made you?
No, she was just a young girl. She was a young girl who was in actual foster care at the time. So, I mean, I can't remember whether we actually spoke about our troubles of life, but I just remember the day that, you know, we both made that decision to get on that train. And there were other occasions, you know, I always spent time at my friend's house. You know, sleepovers were very rare at my house. I was always sleeping over at my friend's house and trying to find that sense of safety, that sense of normality. You know, people I've spoken to over the last few years since I spoke out and went, you know, public with my story, have said, I remember when you hinted about it or you mentioned something about, like, but, you know, we never put two and two together. We never really knew what the problem was, you know.
So you went through all that and you're trying to cope with life. You're trying to do something to actually better your life, but you can't escape from that grooming and that culture and that behavior of the adults around you. Is that what you're trying to say? Okay. When did you actually?
Absolutely. You know,
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Aklima.
No. When did you actually? So you tried to actually escape. You couldn't. You didn't have the train ticket. What happened to you then? Did they bring you back, or did you have to come back?
Yeah. So the police took me back to the family home. From what I remember, social services were involved for a short period of time, but the case was closed. There was no investigation. It was just a naughty child doing what naughty kids do, running away basically, and just trying to, you know, put back, you know, show off or whatever it was. And obviously, people who were close to me were getting suspicious. There was a particular family member who was getting well, she's not family, but she's close to our family, and she was getting extremely suspicious of my father's behaviour, the way he was, the things that he would do, to the point where she actually approached my mum and she said, you know, it's not normal that he's still trying to bath her at this age of 10 and 11 and getting in a bath with her. That's not normal. That's you know. So there were plenty. Now, in hindsight, there were plenty of signals that could have been picked up. It's just who was going to pick them up.
Okay. So when did you actually escape? When did you actually have the courage and you did something about it and you've actually escaped your life of abuse?
Yeah, it was when I was 15. I just obviously completed my GCSEs at school, and I went and house shared. So I found, you know, a house with a lovely bunch of girls, and I got a job working evenings in a bank on a call centre, whilst I was still trying to do my studies at school, and saved up enough to be able to room share. And I spent quite a few years just going from, like, you know, house sharing with many people.
Did you just get up and go? What happened? Just packed your stuff?
No, it was actually, again, it was another fight that had happened between me and my father. I think at that particular occasion, he had come home. He, you know, I was in the kitchen and he was trying to touch my body because that was just so normal that he just came back from work and, you know, he would try and touch me, or how are you doing today, and touch my body. And I just remembered that something inside me was just like, I've got to run away. I've got to get away. This is never, ever, I'm never going to be free from whatever he, you know, his touch and his constant need to be touching me. Like, it was constant, you know. So I remember there was an occasion where I turned around and said to him, you know, if you touch me anymore, I'm going to call the police on you. I'm actually going to call the police. And I remember that night like it was yesterday, because he then did the very common tactic, which is, if you do, I'm going to kill myself, because you're everything to me. My life is you, and I will commit suicide. My life will not be worth living if it doesn't around you. And so the guilt obviously just totally consumed me. I didn't want to be responsible for my father's death. So I left the home.
So you actually left. You had the courage to actually leave. Did you know where you were going, you know, before you left?
Yeah, like I said, I'd kind of done a bit of a plan. I was going to go and either rent a flat, or I was going to go and do some house share. And I'd saved up enough money, thankfully, because I was working in the evening at the call centre, as you know, most of us do at that sort of time. And back in my culture, it was very common for us at the age of 15, you know, to be trying to get little part-time Saturday jobs and whatever. So I was I feel blessed in the sense that I have my head screwed on to look for the right way out. And I think what saddens me, Aklima, is that there is not, there are many that will end up on drugs. They'll end up on the streets because, homeless and in prostitution, and, because they don't have the means to find the way out. And I feel very blessed, from God, from whoever, from my situation, that I had that means in myself to be able to find an escape route.
Very strong woman, or very young, very young child, very strong young child. You had the determination.
Young, very young, yeah.
Did your father or anybody try to then contact you once you left?
Oh yes. My father then became my regular stalker, which everybody knew about. All my friends knew about. If you speak to my friends, they say, yeah, he's the white van man that was always stalking us. He would, if I was going to a nightclub, for example, at the age of 16, or going out with my friends, he'd be around the corner watching. He literally just became the stalker. And the only way that I could then have a kind of normal life was to just play the game, and have him in my life, but at a distance, So yes, Dad, I'm good, and talk to him on the phone, ring him up, how are you? And have him around, because what else was I going to do? He was constantly there everywhere I went. I would leave work and he'd be sitting outside my workplace. That was just normal, just to be stalking me 24/7.
Did you not aim or attempt to report it to the police?
Absolutely no way, which is why I never reported it until even to this day. He was caught, because as far as I was concerned, Aklima, I tried to run away, the police put me back in the same house.
So you had
I
no
was
faith?
Constantly, not at all. And what was I going to tell them? That my father stalked me with no evidence, in my opinion. Obviously I didn't know about the evidence until the police told me about it. So, as a young child, well, I've got no evidence. They're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm a spoiled little princess, because that had been deeply ingrained into me from a very young age, that you are just a spoiled little princess. Nobody will ever listen to you. What was I going to be telling you?
As a concerned father, just checking his daughter.
He was
young.
known as the overprotective father. Yeah, that's what he was known as. The beautiful overprotective father that just loves his little girl to the T,
Okay. Once you escaped, did you ever go back to the house, the family home?
No. Okay. And it was interesting, because it didn't matter what happened to me and how much money I didn't have, I would never go and stay back in that family home. But I did regularly, like I said, go and visit the family home, in order to keep the peace, in order to just keep the kind of normality of, keeping up the graces, keeping up the family,
So basically, he was trying to deal with what happened and trying to sort of like forget about it and see whether things could go to normality. Is that what you were trying to do? Now that you've sort of like...
Yeah, and I think there's always been a part of me that, dreamed to have the family, dreamed to have the perfect mum, perfect dad, and not to have abuse in my life. And I guess when like I said, when I felt like I was at an age where I had taken back my control and I was living away, to me, I had ended that, and I could just be that girl, that daughter, and they could just be my parents, And I think that's what I'm saying. The hardest reality has been is that to then find out that he just turned to the drugs. That was it. That was the easiest way that he could abuse my body without me fighting him anymore.
When did you find out, or when did you know that he was using drugs on you?
When he was arrested in 2011, the police told me.
Okay.
Because they found the drugs inside the house.
So they actually... Now, what sort of evidence did they actually, if you can sort of like step by step, what sort of evidence that actually tells the police that you don't need to be a witness, we don't need any more evidence, we've got enough? They must have had overwhelming evidence. Tell us exactly what sort of evidence they had.
Oh, it was more than overwhelming, Aklima. It was beyond a movie, if I'm honest. And I'll never forget that that's what the police officer said, that if this wasn't actually a reality in real life, you wouldn't even believe it in a movie. The evidence, like I said, consisted of over 100 hours video footage of life spanning my whole entire abuse and rape. They also had the drugs. Obviously, they found the drugs inside the home. There was lots of other bits and pieces. There was like a up in the loft in our house, in the you know, the room with storage. There was all the pictures. There was every single thing. But the actual defining evidence that happened, which is why he got sentenced to 10 years in prison, was whilst he was in prison on bail, waiting to be sentenced on remand. So he's tried to send me a letter from prison to ask me to destroy a diary, a black diary. Well, the letter never got to me because he wasn't allowed to send letters to me in prison. It got to the police. It got into the hands of the police. And so I will never forget, because I remember the next day they went to the house, raided the house, because they were raiding the house months. It was crazy. And at the bottom of the garden, in a locked box, like filing box, because my father was self-employed. He was a business, he was a builder, worked on construction, so he had lots of files. Inside the filing box was a diary, and the diary dated everything. And the diary, the black diary, dated everything. It also scored me on 0 to 10 on the days that he felt that I was great or I was bad. It highlighted the exact amount of drugs that he had used on me. So the diary was gold. It was all there in black and white, all there in writing. It was his diary.
So while he was abusing you, he was scoring you on your performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
I'm lost for words, to be honest with you. Did you eventually tell the police, you guys failed me? Did you actually tell the authorities, you guys failed me?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, even in my victim impact statement, that, you know, I did write one, because what happened was, just before he was due to be sentenced, I asked the police if I could go and watch the videos.
What did they say?
They said yes, because I said to them, I need to watch what you are telling me, because I can't believe it. I can't believe half the stuff that you are telling me, because that's not, you know, if I knew you had this evidence, I would have saved myself, you know.
Yeah.
How can you sit here and tell me that you don't need me to do anything? You know, it just felt so violated. I felt so violated that, you know, you didn't need me. So I've just spent a whole, you know, my whole entire life just living with this abuse and being stalked and just, you know, never ending abuse, and you're telling me you don't need me. So I went to the police station and I watched quite a few hours of video footage. Obviously I was only allowed to watch a certain amount that was right for my mental health and that wouldn't send me off the edge. And I watched one of when I was very young, around the age of 4 or 5, when I was being abused. I watched one of when he did rape me under drugs, and it was quite violent. And I watched another one where I hit him and I kicked him in the face, and the camera fell to the floor. So I watched what I needed to watch. I watched that I was very young. I watched that there was drugs involved, and I watched that I tried to attack him in a way to break the myth of consent, and you just lay there and you allow it to happen. Why didn't you attack? Why didn't you fight? Why didn't anything? Yeah. Especially not as a child. Obviously as a child I'm groomed. I'm doing what daddy asks me to do. And then I actually, after I watched all the videos, I then asked to see a black diary, and they allowed me to see the black diary. And that was that for me. That was the black diary. When I you know, I get shivers when I think about it, is that for me, that was, it changed it changed my mindset from this was my dad and I still wanted to protect him and love him and care for him even though he was in prison, to this is a very, very disturbing, evil man that should not live in this life. Because when you're watching a video and you're just trying to process the whole, the whole thing of abuse, and you're still attached to this is my dad, this is the man I loved, this is the man that should have protected me, and you still got all that grooming going through your head. And yet when I saw the diary, it was like a completely different man. This was a man that was calculating and cold and left me no dignity, because when you want to score somebody, then you leave them with no dignity. So it changed that this is my dad and I love him, to this is a very dangerous man. And that's when I made the victim impact statement. And I said, because I wasn't going to make the victim impact statement, and then the police officer turned, you now want to make the victim impact statement? And I said, yes, now I want the victim impact statement. Now I'm ready to release all what he's made me suffer throughout my life. Whereas before that, Aklima, I was still very much protecting him. When the police phoned me, the first thing I said to them on the phone was, he's going to kill himself. And they were like, no, he's not going to kill himself. Like I was still so groomed, even as like an adult with my own child and a husband. The first thing I said was, oh my God, he's going to kill himself. You've got to let him out of prison. Please, he's going to kill himself. He hasn't killed himself. He's now walking out in the bush. He hasn't killed himself.
Do you actually,
can you see how
he's very calculated? I mean, from, like being the princess and your loving daddy, once you, I'm sure you're in turmoil of so many things, but was there hate? Did you actually hate him after that?
Yeah, I hated him when I was a child, Aklima, but it was a very confused hate, because every time I wanted to hate him, he would help me, help me with my car or help me with money if I was struggling. There was always that, like I said, this confusion between love and hate. Am I supposed to love this man? Or am I supposed to hate him? It was very, very confusing. But the second that obviously I saw that diary, and I saw the whole of my life just sat there in front of me, that was pure hate. There was nothing more than just pure hate.
What about towards your mum? How do you feel towards your mother after that?
I have the same dismorse for her, the same can't even have the words, to be honest, Aklima, because I gave her a chance after he was arrested to show me that she could be the mother, and that maybe he was the issue between us, because he was controlling and he was violent. So I gave her the chance to be the mum, and she failed. So for me, she's on the same pit with him, if I'm honest.
What about the police, the authorities? How do you feel towards the authorities, the social services who failed you? Because they should have been there.
The social services are, absolutely unbelievable. They are fouling every single child abuse victim like me. They have a very backdated view that a child is going to be the one to tell them, and that they're not looking for the red flags. With regards to the
sorry, Mayaameen, I'm going to come back to the social services and other authorities. But first of all, I want to go on to your father's sentencing. He was sentenced for 10 years. Now, obviously, like you said, he hasn't killed himself. He was still alive, he's still alive. How did he come out? Did he actually serve his 10-year sentence? Tell us about that.
No, his sentence finishes in 2021. He's still got another, I think he's probably got about another 8 or 9 months left of his sentence, maybe, about that. He served in total 6 years. So he served just over the law of half a sentence. And the reason why he served that year over, Aklima, was because he was too dangerous to be let out.
So he was too dangerous to be let out, and he's only served 6 years of his 10-year sentence. Who was behind that?
Well,
early release?
Well, in 2016, by law, because this is the flaw in the law, by law, he would have served the half of his sentence, right? So then he has the right by the parole board to apply to serve his sentence in the community. So this was in 2016, and the parole board refused straight out. He was not going to be released to serve his sentence in the community. In 2017, he has by law another right to go up to the parole board and be released. In 2017, Aklima, they refused outright to release him. Okay, but in 2018, they had no more law left in their hand. They had to release him because he'd served over half of his sentence. So by rights, he could have been out after 5 years, and actually less, which is why he went up to 2017, because in our flawed law, they also account the days that he spent in remand. So obviously they reduced 124 days from his sentencing to rectify his days spent in remand. So their hands were tied. They had to let him out. I remember it like it was yesterday when they phoned me and said, we can't do no more. It's the law. He has the right to serve his sentence now in the community until 2021.
It's a ridiculous sentence, but I remember you saying that Samaritans, the charity Samaritans, were involved. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I spoke out. That's why I my anonymity, because he was planning. He was going to be released. I had got into the advocacy work of supporting women, etc., and I'm out here in this world, and I'm trying to support victims of child abuse and women who've been through trauma like me, and struggling, as Aklima, to get charity funding, to get money to support me, to do the job that I'm doing. And when they phoned to let me know that he'd be, being released, for the first time in 6 years, I Googled his name, and I can honestly say, hand on heart, never in 6 years has it ever come to me to Google his name. Why would it? And I did. I just had this, sixth sense by faith to Google his name. And as I Googled his name, he was top of Google. So I was like, wow, hold up. How is he at the top of Google right now when I Googled his name? And the headline said, HMP Chelmsford, which is the prison, HMP Chelmsford prisoner set on fire. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, he's dead, but nobody's told me he's dead. He's been set on fire. So I've opened this article online, and as I'm reading down, so like trying to get my mind to concentrate, all of a sudden it says, Edward Colby from HMP Chelmsford, a trained Samaritan support listener, was listening and supporting the person who set himself on fire in prison. In that wing.
Your father was still in prison. They were the Samaritans, the charity Samaritans, were there to help him gain the release of supporting him.
Well, he became a trained in prison for those like him as part of the rehabilitation prison project. So in theory, Aklima, he was listening to other people's stories about raping children. In theory, that's what he was listening. It's like me listening to somebody's child abuse story, or to a victim. So I'm listening to that victim. I'm having empathy. I'm being empathetic to that victim, and exactly what he is doing he was doing in prison.
So he's raped a child, destroyed a child's life, went into prison. In your opinion, did he actually set fire to himself, or was it a stunt? Your father?
No, no, it wasn't my father. What happened was the person who had actually set themselves on fire, who did pass away, was one of his people he was working with, he was listening to. It was one of his, if you like, service users. It was somebody he was supporting. So what happened is when they had to do the I can't remember the word now, but where they have like a court, the court, to find out how did he die, what did he die of. My father was called to be a witness. So that's why he was in the press, because they're saying Edward Colby of HMP Chelmsford was this guy's support worker, was his listener, and apparently this guy had told my father the night before that he was going to do something stupid, he was going to kill himself. So my father was giving evidence for the guy who set himself on fire.
Okay. So how did Samaritans become involved in your father's case and supporting him?
Well, apparently Samaritans run a prison project which is allowing people to become support listeners within the wing, and so my father signed up for it. I don't know what their rules are for this, but apparently that's what happens. That's part of the prison project. It gives them a chance to do something with themselves in prison.
Okay, so you said the reason you actually came out or spoke out was because of the Samaritans' involvement. Tell us about it. Clarify why.
Okay, the reason being, Aklima, is because not even a week before I read this, I was sat in the Samaritans having a meeting with other charities. You know, I was a social enterprise. I was a charitable organisation. So I was attending meetings with charities, with these charities, and talking about future projects, future work together. I was going to, and Samaritans in particular was where we held many of the meetings in their premises. So the second I saw that, of course, it sparked a fire inside of me. How can I be sitting inside their building talking about the work that I do, whilst on the back end, my father is a listener, a trained support listener for them? It doesn't make any sense to me, Aklima, you know, and it never will do.
Now, we're going to come back now. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. And they are still listed on some of the government websites and other websites as the charity who help victims. Now, I don't know what sort of victims they pick, but certainly not child or not children. But from, you know, hearing from you, I mean, do you have any trust? Are you ever going to trust them again?
Never. I had sent the Samaritans, I had sent many emails wanting a statement, wanting to know what they felt about this. I provided all the evidence. I mean, it's online. You only can Google it yourself, and you'll see the you know, the HMP Chelmsford, and he's listed as a Samaritan support listener. It's, you know, I spent months and months, Aklima, trying to get an answer from them, and they had never, ever responded to me. It went viral on Twitter about and this story, and, you know, hundreds and hundreds of victims were tweeting them wanting explanation. They have never, ever spoken to me or contacted me or replied to me. So that is why my work with them was done. I don't trust them. Anybody can come forward and say to me that, you know, it's part of a prison rehabilitation project. It's not the same. It does not matter to me. If you are providing a prison project to paedophiles in a very high class paedophile ring, you know, wing in prison, then there's something very flawed in what you're trying to achieve out in this big wide world. Because, you know, I would never work with sexual offenders. That's not what I do. My organisation supports women and victims. So if that's my ethos, there is absolutely no way that I'm going to go out there and support the offender of my victim.
Thank you, MAYAMEEN. Now I'm going to come to other authorities, social services. They're supposed to be there to protect children. What are your views on the services provided by social services?
I think with social services, they, as I said before, I think their training is very backdated. I think that they are still missing big signs and red flags because of the training that they have. You know, I think what people try to do, I mean, it's not really just the fault of social services as a whole, it's the fault of every responsibility to every adult, is that they rely on the fact that children are just going to speak. You know, it's as if we're relying on children, innocent children, to save themselves, rather than relying on the adults to be there to protect them. So I think local authorities and even just everyday people are failing our children, and I mean failing our children, because when we stick with this view that a child will come and tell you, and this is within schools, it's within education, it's a backward way of thinking. It's never going to happen. And the fact that, you know, if the tick list, you know, the checklist that they've got in front of them doesn't meet how the child is responding, then there's no cause for concern. And that's a massive issue for me.
Coming back to your case, did you ever face or speak to social services and tell them?
No.
No. Did they ever come back to you, apologize?
No, I mean, as far, I don't even remember the social services being involved. This was only confirmed through, you know, the case as it was unravelled, and then the person who I'm very close to, who was close to our family, she's the one who actually said that she reported to social services, and she said that when she'd done that, obviously everybody turned against her because she. But I remember their involvement with me at all.
Okay.
It certainly must have been very short-lived. They must have come out, given an assessment, and then left it at that, because there was no long engagement or involvement with social services in my family.
Okay. What about society in general? I mean, I'm going to actually talk briefly about the society in general. Do you think, you know, society should do more? No, are we going to, rather than the authorities and the, you know, law enforcement and the social services, do you think society in general, the neighbors, and people around you, do you think they should be doing more?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, Aklima, if we as adults are not doing more, how on earth can we expect children to do that? And the problem that we have in society now, this is, you know, with religious institutes, in education, it's everywhere, it is your neighbor, is that if you are not providing a safe place where you could say to somebody, I will believe you. If there's anything is happening, I will believe you, and I will do my utmost to protect you. Because as children, we look up to these authoritative figures, whether they're a teacher, whether they're your neighbor. We've all got a neighbor that we loved, right? We've all got a neighbor that, you know, used to give us sweets or be the friendly one. We've all got that, you know, growing up. We've all got the teacher that we felt comfortable with. But the problem is that a child has no faith and trust in that authoritative role. So we as an adult, we need to be constantly telling that same groomed child, as much as they were told how they are spoiled and a princess and daddy loves you, being told by the person that they maybe spend time with, I love you and I believe you, and if you're being harmed or something's not comfortable, you can tell me. And the problem is we don't have these conversations.
But do you think
we don't?
Yeah. Do you think the society, because you're not getting that support, or the children are not getting that support, but you know, from the, you know, anybody and everybody, unless it happens to them or, you know, they're involved. Do you think it's as a result that the child sexual abuse is becoming normal? You know, it's happening in the institution, at home. Is it becoming normal? For example, let's, you know, Rotherham grooming. And then the others, I mean, if all you need to do is just Google child abuse, and I can't even go into the statistics. I mean, obviously I've given you the statistics for last year, but it seems to be, you open up, it seems to be it seems to be a trend. You know, I just don't understand.
I tell you what it is. It's normal to see this new rape case, this new paedophile, this new whatever in the press. Is very, very, it's normal. So what happens is when you see it the first time, you have a, oh my God, that poor child. You see it second time, oh God, another one. oh God, another one. Oh, look, another one down the road that's just been arrested for, you know, sex offending. The issue that we have is that survivors like myself don't have access to these platforms. We don't have access to speak. So when we speak out, we're the shocking ones. We're the ones that are like, oh my God. So they don't see a survivor's voice enough in order to do the comparison of the two, right? So society is becoming so immune to actually child abuse that a survivor is the weirdo. The survivor is not normal. The survivor, like, you know, is the strange being that actually wants to talk about what's happened to her. You know, and this is the problem. And also we then have the issue where, you know, if you look at Cutie's film, half the people we went against it. Half of the people were saying, what's wrong with it? It's just a bunch of kids dancing. So we have so much around us that is influencing us that actually the survivor becomes the shocking one, not the abuser anymore.
But is this, they become the shocking ones, but are they stigmatized as well by society, by family, by friends as well? The shame.
Of course. You know, you've got a chain reaction of being a survivor, is that, are you ready to speak out and possibly even report and lose your entire family and lose everything that you've tried to hold on to and lose everything that you've tried to protect, right? Because when you don't speak out, you're not doing it to protect yourself, you're doing it to protect other people. Okay, you're not protecting yourself, you're protecting other people. So if you are, you know, speaking out, you know, you have to be ready that, one, you're not going to be believed. Yeah, and that's a scary thought, that people are going to, you know, and that's a serious you know, accusation to be making if you are not believed. You know, we have to think about, like me, I didn't know there was an evidence. Who on earth believed me if I spoke out? Then you lose your family and family members, then you lose your society and your, you know, if you're from a cultural background, you've got more pressure. You know, you have got to think so much before you can even get to the point of any healing and actually getting any justice. You know, you've got to lose everything first in order to feel a sense of justice. And then, unfortunately, we live in a land with a very flawed law. And, you know, my case is extremely rare to be able to have evidence, right? It's extremely rare. Unfortunately, and as you probably know, Aklima, because, you know, you've worked in the field, is that actually there are many that don't even get it to court. It doesn't get to court. So they've reported and they've exposed themselves for what?
Yeah. So we're running out of time. We have so much to talk about. The one last question I wanted to ask you was, MAYAMEEN, do you think the sentences in this country are enough for perpetrators?
No. I did a petition. When I spoke out, I did 2 petitions. My first petition was for a child refuge here in the UK, and I'm very, very blessed, and thank you for everybody who supported that, because that's still going through the government in Wales, through the Senate. We're still waiting to find out what's going to be happening with the petition of that, and it's been very successful, and we've made a lot of movement and legacy. The second petition I did was to change the sentencing guidelines. That hasn't, it didn't move, it didn't get off the ground. So our sentencing guidelines are flawed, and the policies and the structures that we have in place to protect children, it doesn't really exist. So there are 2 major issues, and they're the 2 things that I petitioned and campaigned against.
And one other thing, well, hopefully this is the last question. We've got so much to talk about, like I said before, you know, there's so much things to cover. Obviously, you know, we haven't got the time, but is there anything that you want to tell our audience that the child abuse, regarding this issue of child abuse, and what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Aklima, I work, you know, I'm self-employed, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a specialist in trauma, I've won awards for the work that I'm doing, you know, and for me, it's like, okay, if anyone's watching this, you know, you don't have to report. You know, I'm not here to tell people to go and report. I'm here to say, give yourself the justice you deserve in reaching out to somebody to release what you are suffering. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's not just about speaking out publicly. It's not about reporting, so to speak. It's about you getting healing, because at the end of the day, regardless of what sentence that perpetrator has had, the justice will never be served. There will never be justice, and the only justice you can try and live with is within yourself. So, you know, to have a platform like this to share that out there, then I really hope and encourage that people do text comments, they, you know, to this video. There's a text number I've seen going across the screen. Get in touch. I know you, Aklima, well enough that, you know, if you ever felt that they needed my support, you'd pass them along. So it's really about, that's the way we're going to make a difference in society, is by having these conversations and stop making them so uncomfortable and taboo, so that people actually feel safe enough to say, I need to speak to somebody about it.
Okay, MAYAMEEN, thank you very much. And my last request to the audience and my viewers: every child, regard them as your own child, because they might be not your biological, they might be not, you may not even know them, but no child deserves any sort of abuse at all. And you know, they are our future. They are our next generation, and please open your arms to help a child. Even if you just have a hunch that there's something wrong, please do try and help, because it doesn't cost you anything to help them. And obviously, as MAYAMEEN is such a courageous woman to share her story, but hers is one of many thousands. And I'm really requesting for my viewers to please do more. You know, we need to work together to tackle this issue. It is becoming normal. We don't want to make it normal. We have to work together. That's all my request to my viewers. Yeah. Any comments, any suggestions, please do let us know. And for today's show, thank you for everyone for coming to the show. And thank you very much, MAYAMEEN. I hope you have a great evening. And hopefully we'll... Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.